Thanks for tuning into the Reds podcast, brought to you in part by Paperhead.com. We have a promo right now. It is $3 for 3 weeks. That is a premium promo. It does include everything on the plate, and so go check them out right now at Paperhead.com. And now let's get on with the Red Show. Hey, what's going on, guys? How are you? It's Red. It is that time of the week, and I'm going to go through a couple of things. We're going to talk about the baseball. We're going to talk about the March Madness wrap-up. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I do as far as limiting goes when baseball does roll around. But first, I do want to talk about the March Madness, which was an exquisite year. I had a great time watching a lot of these games. There was Cinderella stories. There were teams that should have made the bubble, I guess, in theory, that didn't make the bubble at all, the Louisvilles and Kentuckys of the world. You look at the fact that UCLA went all the way down deep into the Final Fours. And then also you look at the fact that Gonzaga went undefeated until the championship game, which then they lost to the Baylor Bears, which is the first time they've won an NCAA men's championship, which is a monumentous task. And it brings a lot of attention to their program, which has always been relatively good. I've always liked to watch Baylor as a team. They've usually had a pretty good program and play well together as far as the coaching or anybody that's in the staffing has given them an offensive kind of game. They usually are a high-scoring team, and that's what I like to watch. I don't like to watch these grinder defensive games that a lot of, head coaches love to do. I know defense wins games. It's just not fun to watch for me. That's just my personal opinion on that. But it was a great season. Obviously, when Baylor did win, I made a lot because of the fact that a lot of people were betting on Gonzaga to just go undefeated this year, considering that they did so well throughout all the games and everything. And there were some nail biters in there, but I had a lot of people lay some action on Gonzaga. And that's good for me to see. They took the money lines on these games, considering it was that late in the season, and they started looking at, not having the spreads be a factor in that. So it was heavy bets with a little payoff that I ended up, collecting a bit. That's exciting for me. Good close to the basketball, or at least the March Madness college basketball season. Baseball has started, and as I mentioned before, I dislike baseball for a lot of reasons. The beginning of the season isn't so bad. A lot of the favorites end up performing relatively subpar until the gel starts happening and the teams start playing well, and there's a lot of upsets. So people bet, money lines and stuff like that. I've seen some of my players actually start playing the run lines early on in the seasons, and that just has to do with their own, fear of the same things that I've just mentioned. Sometimes the minus 180s and the 200s that are already out there, like the Cincinnati Reds, just considering that they're 4-1 right now, and a couple of the teams on the East Coast that are in the same 4-1 or 3-1 or 3-2. It's easier to predict a run line sometimes in that sense just by playing the pictures. So what I will talk about now is what I do as far as like parlay controls and whatever else, and it is a 3-teamer in baseball. If you want to play with me, you're not getting more than 3 teams in the baseball, and that's just because I don't want anybody to be able to come in and just rack a bunch of favorites in the near future when they actually do start getting a little more predictable. Putting in 3 favorites, let's say, whatever, and then 1 dog, or maybe even a small favorite like a minus 120, 130, and then coming in and winning. They bet like $100, and on a 4-teamer that pays quite a bit, even if it is a bunch of favorites in there. And I just don't like the risk, so I keep it to 3 teams, and that's just what I do. And I also keep the payout max no more than $5,000. I keep a wager limit, usually between 150 to 250 for certain. I know it sounds low. A lot of people are gonna be like, "That's low," but in reality, if you're a guy like me, like I've been around a minute, and this is just for the parlays. I'm not talking about straights. These guys can bet a lot bigger on straights, and I'm not holding them there. But it's just in the baseball parlays that I'm not a fan. So that's the little tip that I'm gonna cover right now, at least for managing your book. If you're somebody who's got big old huevos, that's okay. You can book whatever you want. Just my 2 cents on that front. I'm going to talk a little bit about the basketball right now, which is, as far as the Eastern Conference goes, you already almost know, okay, 76ers and the Nets are going to be around, right? The Nets especially. They just picked up so much talent. Like, it's almost broken. It's like the Lakers should have been. Considering, having LeBron and all the guys that they picked up for big centers. And I don't know. It's actually crazy right now how stacked the Nets are. So, again, when you look at that in perspective and you talk about that, you would think that the Lakers would be in that same realm, right? You would think that they would be 1 or 2 in the actual rankings. But they're not. They're actually far, like 6 games behind as far as in percentages by the Jazz and 5 games behind the Suns right now, right? And I'm just going to say that, that has a lot to do with team fluidity. And it has a lot to do with what can happen over time, right? If they start playing together, that's great. And I'm sure that they will. They always end up going to the playoffs and end up being a big powerhouse team and end up probably, we'll see, hopefully they go this whole time. One thing that I did want to mention, too, about all this, considering that they're not in a bubble this year and LeBron James is not the center of attention regarding the fact that he basically made the last year's season happen by himself and pushing for it, and the Kyrie Irvings of the world saying that it was dumb and that they shouldn't play and all these things. Now everyone's out playing and they're going to the different arenas, and there's been some cancellations here and there, but not a lot. Not a lot. And what does that say about the sporting environment? What does that say about what is happening in the gaming demographic? It's that people are starting to wake up. There was a Texas Rangers game, MLB game, packed capacity. And I know that I have some listeners that are probably a vaccination person. They're probably a COVID believer. And I'm just going to say that because there's no really another way to like separate the two, because there's Texas and Florida and parts of, the other southern states and even other, northern states that are kind of waking up to the fact that they can function at full capacity as long as people are careful. And that's okay. And it bodes well for the sporting events. It bodes well for anything that has to do with the economy. It has to do with the fact that our nation, now that the baseball it's the American pastime, is up and running. It makes a lot of sense that these things are going to be tested, if you want to say it that way, right? This year especially. Now that the third wave or fourth wave, whatever Fauci's talking about, is passing, and people are basically getting out there and living their lives accordingly. And I'm not sure how much maybe the government likes it or dislikes it. I know that the federal government level, the Biden administration in general, has not supported a lot of the choices that Florida and Texas have made regarding opening up without certain restrictions. And that's just the beauty in having a democracy. That's the beauty in having separate states. We are a union, right? United States. And that means that governors have power to do what they want to do within their state jurisdiction. So how does that play into everything else? Football season's going to roll around. Going to be great. Baseball season should go through as long as people are still careful and there's not like huge outbreaks or whatever, the testing that goes on. And I'm really looking forward to this 2021 July, after the NBA playoffs go by, and obviously that'll be fun to watch this year as well, because it'll be all the teams that should have been in it instead of the bubble season that ended up happening last year. So yeah, it's just as far as the actual June, July, August, and when football rolls around, it's going to be a fantastic year, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope that as far as everybody else that's out there and being safe and doing all the things, they start taking advantage of the fact that this is our time to really get back into the groove of things and stop being shell-shocked by what happened, and bring the morale back, bring the happiness back, bring the people that are out there going and getting it back, and that's in my realm, in the bookie realm, right? There was a lot of fear based on what happened. And I think that fear is dissipating, and I think that a lot of things are going to be good. So I think for now I'm going to cut it off a little bit early this week, just because there's going to be a lot to cap on in the next couple of weeks as the baseball does develop, and we'll also see how a couple of things transpire in testings and facilities, and if there's any of the outbreaks that come up. But as far as I just mentioned, I think it's going to be a pretty smooth sailing year this year. And so I hope the odds are always in your favor. If you do like, subscribe, and follow, it would be fantastic. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning into the Reds podcast, brought to you by paperhead.com. For all relative promos going on right now, please check them out at paperhead.com. Also, opinions expressed on this show are not that of paperhead.com. And if you do like what you hear, for all the agent news coming up, please like, subscribe, and follow. We will see you next week.